Greetings and welcome back to the CBMW Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Swan, the executive editor of Icon, a journal for biblical anthropology, and I am joined by my good friends Colin Smothers, the executive director of CBMW, and Denny Burk, who is our president. Guys, there's big news, and in fact, you may have told me about this big news. It is that America's favorite couple, Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, are engaged to be married, and I am told that the result from this is going to be many, many new marriages. Colin, can you explain the significance of this engagement for us?
Well, as a lifelong Chiefs fan, I can't be anything but supportive here. I would dispute the characterization. This is America's favorite couple. Okay, well, maybe most polarizing couple, but I do have great hope that all of America's, teeny boppers will see this engagement and aspire to greater things: marriage, family formation, maybe even a baby boom. Who knows? There's been predictions. Brad Wilcox, I saw him talking about that. He's been concerned with the declining marriage rate, declining birth rate in the West for many, many decades now, and he is signaling that this might be the start of something new. So who knows? I'm going to be optimistic here.
Colin, you're such an upbeat guy. I can't believe you just see the sunshine around every corner. I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to. How about nonstop wall-to-wall coverage of Travis and Taylor all the way leading up to their marriage? So I hope this engagement is really short and it comes quickly. Otherwise, we're going to be in an endless loop of Travis and Tay-Tay news.
Well, the NFL is going to love it. They'll have new viewership. If Colin is sunshine and lollipops, let me just give an alternative perspective. If this doesn't work out ultimately, those are going to be some really tough songs. And
a whole nother
album. We of course don't hope for that, but I'm just thinking of the musical side of things.
Well, it's great timing, actually, John, for what we're planning at CBMW. Actually, see what I did there. On September 16th, we've got a conference coming up. We're bringing in Ryan Anderson, going to speak alongside Albert Mohler and actually Denny Burk and Richard Nelson of the Commonwealth Policy Center. They're all going to be in Louisville, Kentucky, at the campus of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, September 16th. That's a Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. And the topic of the conference is the family and cultural renewal. We're going to be talking about how the family really is the bedrock of society for social flourishing. And I don't think it's something you're going to want to miss. So if you're in the Louisville area, if you're within driving distance, we would encourage you to come and visit us. We'd love to see you there.
All right, be there, Louisville, September 16th. Now, I want to move our conversation in a different direction. Denny, yesterday you published an article with World Opinions titled Jen Hatmaker and Her Appeal to Deconstruct. It's about this former influencer, Jen Hatmaker, her recent interview with New York Times. Denny, for those who don't know who Hatmaker is, can you let us know a little bit about her biography and why it was important you felt to write this piece?
Well, over the weekend, I read this interview that she did with the New York Times, and I was really kind of riveted by it because I've been following her somewhat over the last decade. And I'll be honest, recently I haven't been following her at all. But about 10, 12 years ago, everybody knew who Jen Hatmaker was. She was kind of an evangelical darling, and she was kind of a rising star. She was speaking at all the conferences. She was writing a bunch of books. In fact, in my own denomination, she had a multi-book contract with our publishing house here in the Southern Baptist Convention. And she was, I don't know what else to say, except she was just a rising star. Everybody loved her. And here's the thing. She genuinely has this wonderful humor and charisma about her. She kind of got on everybody's radar screen back around 2012-ish. She wrote this long essay about finishing school as a mother, like the last day of school for her kids as a mother, and how she's like barely making it in. It was just hilarious. It was so funny. It was a blog post, a personal blog post. It was so funny. It went viral on the internet and landed her on the Today Show. So she just has a lot of charisma, and a lot of folks really were appreciating the fact that she was an outspoken Christian, and she was trying to having a ministry primarily to women. And but all that began to change as you moved into the middle of the 2010s, because in 2000, I don't know, 14-ish or somewhere around there, she announced that she wanted to go into the basement, meaning go to a private place and just think about the issue of sexuality. She thought it would be good for Christians, and herself included, to kind of stop talking about this publicly and just think about the issues surrounding sexuality. And of course, what usually happens after an announcement like that from a Christian leader is they never come out of the basement, fully affirming what the Bible teaches. They usually come out fully affirming LGBTQ, which is what happened with her in 2016. And so when she emerged, she and her husband both announced at the time that they were fully affirming of LGBTQ identities, for gay marriage, and that their mind had shifted on this. Well, when that happened, that made her influence within evangelicalism really crater, and it never really recovered after that. But it didn't bring her to a point where she wasn't still trying to influence Christian women. She was still doing that, and she's still actually doing that to this day. And she's got it. And the reason she was being interviewed in the New York Times is because she's got a new book coming out called Awake, and she's still trying to influence in the direction that she has gone, which is the direction of deconstruction. And if you go to her website, even now, she's selling courses, $69 a pop, to help people deconstruct. And so it's really, really sad what's happened. And what struck me was this was somebody who was on the inside of evangelicalism and a lot of people admired and listened to. And she has walked away from that. She's not just walked away from the evangelicalism. She's really walked away from the faith. And so I thought it was important to say something about it, to write about it, to warn about it, simply because she is not trying to, walk away quietly. I think she's trying to take people with her. And so that's why I thought it was important for us to talk about.
I don't know what you guys think about this, but I was just generally considering the direction of some of these influencers who have become now the deconstructionists. And there are, of course, a varieties of nuances to some of these stories, but they all seem to include, and I'm happy for you guys to add to this, there's some kind of a disenchantment. There is a concession to the spirit of the age. And, of course, so much of this is happening on the topics that we talk about, gender and sexuality. And then eventually there's total accommodation, which is essentially where we are now. And it's interesting, in the article, the New York Times interview, the interviewer asks, is there ever a part of you that wonders if in embracing more progressive ideas, or what your critics would call wokeism, you just swapped one set of beliefs for another? And she answers, there is that possibility. Well, the truth is she has. What she has done is she has swapped her former conservative evangelical convictions with the whatever convictions you want to call it, wokeism, the spirit of the age.
I think that's exactly right, John. And the reality is, once you get on the progressive morality trajectory, you're kind of signing up for whatever the next thing is going to be, and whatever the next, fad in ethics and morality, whatever the next thing that the spirit of the age has endorsed, that's sort of what you are signed up for. And we've seen this path trod, well worn, over and over and over again. The founders of this organization, CBMW, were warning about this trajectory that happens once you begin to question what the Bible teaches on men's and women's roles, men's and women's design, God-given design. Once you begin to kind of second guess that teaching, it's really just a slippery slope, to use that metaphor, which often people invoke as some kind of a logical fallacy. But all we're doing is just demonstrating the connection between questioning the Bible's clear teaching on what the Bible says about men's and women's roles in the home and the church, in society, and then it's just a one more step toward being affirming, LGBT affirming, gay marriage affirming, and then all the rest. And if you notice in that interview, the New York Times interviewer actually brings up what they determine as patriarchy, or these kind of hierarchical roles. And it's very clear that Hatmaker had rejected those, not only in her journey toward being gay affirming and then kind of rejecting Christian orthodoxy altogether. But really that played into how she began to see the Bible's teaching, this kind of traditional morality that she had been taught as growing up as a Southern Baptist as oppressive to her and her identity as a woman. This was something that she wanted to throw off and to reconsider, which really landed her in the place that we see her, in the pages of the New York Times. It's a sad trajectory, but it's a predictable one.
What's really fascinating to me is one of the things that she really sneers at in this interview is what she calls purity culture. And this is a common theme. It's a trope now amongst those who are deconstructing. These ex-evangelicals talk about quote unquote purity culture in the same way that feminists talk about the patriarchy. It's this system that's designed to oppress people. So patriarchy in feminist ideology is designed to oppress women. Purity culture is designed to oppress women, but also other young people who are impressionable with, it draws up images of some men sitting in a back room somewhere planning on how to, oppress all the weaker people that they have influence over. It's that kind of way of talking about it. And they have just these nefarious plans. And so they've inflicted purity culture upon evangelicalism. But then when you go and look under the hood and see what she's talking about when she's referring to purity culture and what she was raised in, she calls it a purity culture. What she's complaining about is abstinence before marriage. Abstinence before marriage is purity culture. She's complaining about fathers who would guard the virtue of their daughters. That's purity culture. So all of this, fundamental, basic Christian teaching about sexual purity is now being lumped in as some kind of toxic systemic problem that you need to break free from. And of course, that's what she's saying about herself. She's broken free from purity culture. She says she's dating a guy now. She's divorced, sadly, since 2020, but she's dating a guy. She says she's going through a sexual renaissance. And so it's really sad because she's broken out of the purity culture, but really the purity culture she broke out of was just basic Christian sexual morality. And then she's commending this to anybody who will come and, buy what she's selling. In fact, one of the courses on her website is a course on, I think it's called Sex Education 101. And I think it's the second lesson in there is on deconstructing your faith narratives in terms of what you believed about sex before and what you could believe after. So we're not talking about some, systemic extra biblical thing that we need to cast off. She's talking about just basic Christian sexual morality and that she's leaving it behind.
Now, in the interview at some point, Jen responds to a question and she says something to the effect of she loves Jesus, but maybe not his folks. How would you guys respond to that statement? Is that possible?
I don't think it's possible because who are Jesus's folks but his own body? As he taught in his earthly ministry very clearly, as his apostles understood, they were commissioned by Christ himself to carry forth his teaching, his word to the world, and the good news of the gospel, to the ends of the earth. So this arbitrary bifurcation between Jesus and his people is not something that the Bible permits or sustains at all, and it's not even logical, honestly. But I think what we're talking about here, when you drill down all the way to the bottom of what the issue here is, we're looking at a crisis of authority. It is very clear that for Jen Hatmaker, what is her authority structure? She's really just thrown off all notions of authority. No authority in tradition, no authority in her upbringing, no authority in the faith of her fathers, no authority in the scriptures, no authority in the church. What is her authority? It's sort of whatever fancies her, today and comes to her mind in this interview in the New York Times. And that is a dangerous place to be. And if sort of the through line through her comments there is an overthrowing of all authority, all claims to right and wrong, true and false, anything that would teach, some kind of a morality that maybe challenges the kinds of feelings and the kinds of positions that you might hold apart from this particular authority structure. It looks like what she has done is she has just thrown off any notion of any kind of authority, which is a dangerous place to be. And as Christians, we can't operate that way. God is who he is. God is our creator, and his word is final and unchangeable. And we exist as the sheep of his pasture. We are those under his authority and wanting to order our lives around his word. And what Jen Hatmaker is selling is something that Christians cannot be buying at all.
And John, to your point about, she says that she's a big fan of Jesus, but she just doesn't like his folks very much. The thing that comes to my mind is just how alien that is to the New Testament. There is no such Christianity which loves Jesus, but has contempt for his people. I think of Saul on the road to where was he going? Damascus. I was about to say Tarshish. I'm losing my mind over here. Saul's on the road to Damascus, and he's going to Damascus to persecute Christians. Mm-hmm. And on the way, Jesus meets him, and he says, Jesus says to him, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Why are you, in other words, what you're about to do to these people, you're doing to me. You think of Jesus' teaching in Matthew 25, where he talks about those who are his disciples. He calls them the least of these. And he says, whatever you've done to the least of these, my brothers, my disciples, my people, whatever you do to them, you've done it to me. Mm-hmm. Jesus takes it very personally when you hold his people in contempt. And that's why John says, how are you going to love God whom you haven't seen if you can't love your brother whom you have seen? It's an impossibility. So what she's suggesting there is this idea that you're going to have this personal side relationship with Jesus, but you're going to, despise his bride. That doesn't exist in the New Testament. In fact, it's one of the signs of apostasy in the New Testament. And her testimony here is bearing all the signs of apostasy.
Yeah, and we truly hope that Hatmaker can repent and rejoin the church and rejoin the faith. And so we pray to that end. Until next time, visit cbmw.org to find more biblical resources on the family, gender, and sexuality.